Good evening, Klal Frat, Prata Klal. דבר המימינו, דבר המסופו, וכן שני חתומי 50 זד שבו הכתוב ששרים מניהם. יהי רצון מבמנך אדוני לנבותינו, שתחלקנו בתורתך, ממנע מתאמתו שלום רב הכהן, אוהב שלום ורדף שלום, ובית בריאות ומקרבן, לעצו רעה. Page 71, the Kaddish de Rabbanan, all those in mourning or observing a yard sites. Page 71. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'al ma divrach yirtei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon u'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'me'ol maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, V'yit hadar v'yit alev v'yit alal shmei d'kudashah brechu leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imeru. Amen. Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Tamidei-hon v'al kol Tamidei-hon v'al kol mandaskim b'raita di v'atra hadin v'di b'chol atar v'atar Yehed lahon ulchon shlama rabachina v'chnista v'rachamin v'chayin arechinu mizonaru v'chiahu v'kana min katam avuhon di v'shmaya v'imeru. Amen. Yehed shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imramav hu rachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. Page 72, Shir Shayom, the Psalm for Shabbat. Hayom Yom Shebish Karoda, Shabuyim Rivita Migdash, Mizmor Shlir Yom HaShabbat, Tov Lodana, Lana Zemeshel Chal Yon, Lakip Boker Chastech, Mincha Balaylot, Alei Asor Velomen Hevel, Hezeki Benichin Or. Sadika Tama Ifra, Karzbavanis Gesh, Chulin Meveta Nabachatsot Elohim Yafrichu, O Yinu Beseva, the Shenin Ranim Yu, Lagid Kishar Artsuri, Velo of Latabo. Page 81. Bis Moshir Chaka by Ladid. Hafata bispedol mochali bitakta zini simcha lamani zemecha chavod lo yudom Adonai Elohai Olam Odeka. Page 82, the mourner's couch, all those in mourning observing a yard site. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah, be'al ma divrach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru. Shmei Rabba Mevorach Leolam U'Me'ah Yitbarach V'yishtabach V'yitpa'ar V'yitramam V'yithadar V'yitalev V'yitalal Shmei D'Kudashah Brechu Leila Min Kol Birchata V'shirata Tushbechata V'nechamata Damiran Be'alma V'imeru. Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya V'chayim Aleinu V'yal Kol Yisrael V'imeru. Amen. Oseh Shalom B'imromav Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu v'al Kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. We rise, page 83, for the section known as Pesukei Zimra, with Baruch She'amar. Baruch She'amar v'haya Olam, Baruch Hu, Baruch Hoseh v'Reshi, Baruch Hamer v'Oseh, Baruch Ozem Kayem, Baruch Merchem Ha'Aretz, Baruch Merchem Ha'Briot, Baruch Meshem L'Oriyah, Baruch Ha'Elad v'Kayem L'Netzach, Baruch Yom Mitziel, Baruch Shemo. Baruch atah Adonai melech haolam, ha'el ha'varachaman hu mufiyamo, mishabach mfar b'lshon chasidav v'yivdav, v'shrei David avdecha ne'elech Adonai Eloheinu b'shivcho z'miro, negadelcha sheshebecha nefecha, m'neskir shimcha m'lichcha l'chainu Eloheinu, yachich ha'olamim, melech mishabach mfar deyet shemo ha'gadol, Baruch atah Adonai melech mahulal, batish b'chochochot. You may be seated, page 96, Ashrei. Ashrei Yoshavei Beitech, Ojalu Chasela. Ashrei ha'am shekachalo, Ashrei ha'am shadonai Elohav, Tehillah LeDavid. פותח את ידיך ומצביע לכל חרצות, צדיק נם בכל דרכיו וחסי בכל מעשיו, קרוב לכל קרוב, לכל אשר קרוב אמת, רצון ויב יעשה ואת שבתם ישמע ויושיעם, שומר אדוני וקרשם ישמיד, תהילת אדוני ידבר פיו, יברך כל בשר שם קדשו לעולם ועד, ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ועד עולם. Hallelujah. Page 97 in the middle. Hallelujah. Adonai Shemer Gerim, Yatom Amana, Yidod, Shem Yvade, Yunumal Hananai Lam, Halcyon Ladovador, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Kitos, Armalohenu, Kaim, Nabatila, Bona Yushalim, Adonai, Nuclear, Vichanes. ישלח לרב מגיד לרב לחוב חכם משפטיו לישראל לא עשה כן כל גוי משפטים בל ידעום הללויה page 99 הלילה הלל מן השמיים הלו ברים הלו כל מלכיו הלו כל צבאיו הלו שמש וירח הלו מש יעלו את שם אדוני כי נשגב שמו לבדו הודו על השמיים שהארץ וירם קרן לעמו תלו חסידיו לבני ישראל קרובו הללויה page 100 הללויה של אדוני שיר חדש של דפים ישמח ישראל בסוף יעלו שמם מחל לאסור מלכיהם וזיכם לחיים ונחיים בקמזל מסלו שקעת כתוב הדו לך חסידיו הללויה בקודשו הללו בקיוזו הללו בגבורתיו הללו קרוב גודלו הללו שופר, הלו בנבל וכינור, הלו בתופו מחול, הלו במינים מבוגב, הלו בציל צלי שמה, הלו בציל צלי תשורה, כל נשמתה הליה, הללויה, כל נשמתה הליה, הללויה, ברוך ה' העולם, אמן ואמן, ברוך ה' מיציון ששלום הילה, ברוך ה' אלוהים עושה נבלו ודוב, ורק כבדו לעולם, ימלך אבקותו לארץ, אמן ואמן, top of 101, ברך דוד, לכלכלה ויאמר דוד. Atzahu Adonai Elohim, Asher Bechartam V'hamsav Zedhu and Kostim, Shamtam Oz Abraham, Matzatel Memno, Benavanachecha, Becharot, Imo, Hachbri to Letetza Kanani, Hachit, Amori, Basi, Vagashi, Letetza, Vahaya Bakata Lifnehem Reviewed Bukhayam, Bayabasha, Edrafim Shlach, and the Smalakamo, Evan Bamayim Azihim, Vayosha Adonai, Bayamot Yisrael, Yam Yisrael. Israel and Mitzrayim et Sfatayam Yar Israel Tagidulah Asher Mitzrayim Hum Adonai V'Minu Adonai Moshe Avdaho Az Yashir Moshe V'nei Israel Tishur Zenor Lashir L'Nai Kigoga Susra Kumya Moshe Migdash Adonai Konono Yidecha Adonai Yimloch Le'elam Va'ehed Adonai Yimloch Le'elam Va'ehed Kilana Hamlucha Moshe B'Gam Lo Mishum B'Har Tzion Sh'Potar Yisa V'Hita Lan Hamlucha V'Hayidan Melech Kol Haaretz B'Yam Adonai Echad U'Shemo Echad top of 104 Nishmat Kol Chad V'Rech Et Shemcha Adonai Eloheinu. Ha'el, Hagadol, Hagibov Hanara, El Yon Kohen Shemaim Va'aretz, and Lel Shebechach Anefecha, Menerech Et Shem Kodshecha, Kamor, LaDavid, Brachi, Nafshi, Et Adonai V'chol Krovai, Shem Kodsho, Ha'el B'tatzimot, Uzecha, Hagadol, B'chlot Shemecha, Hagibor L'netzach, Hanor, Amenoratecha, Hamelch, HaYoshev El Kisei Ram, V'nisa. We turn back in our Siddurim to page 82 for a moment. All those in mourning are observing a yahrzeit, page 82. Gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabah, be'alma dirach irutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kari v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mevorach le'olam u'me'ol maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kudashah brechu le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata damiran be'alma v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imeru. Amen. We continue in the middle of page 105 with Shochein as we actually the Shachrit or the morning service. Chloe.
I'm happy to invite Chloe to my bima, please. Shochenad Maharom v'kadosh shemoho.
Shochenad Maharom v'kadosh shemoho.
Fi shem tithalal u'divrei tzadikim titbarach u'bishon chasidim titromam u'bekerev kedoshim titkadash u'makalot ribevot hamecha bet Yisrael. You want to do chatzika? הכל דברי שירו דוד בנשם עבדך משיחך ישתבח שמך לעד.
We rise top of page 106. We're officially now in what's known as the Shachrit or the morning service, the service which will precede reading.
ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני אל מן הגדול בתשבחות אל ההודעות אדון הנפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אלכי העולמים.
יגדל ויקדש שמי רבה.
אמן.
ועלמא דברה קירותי וימליך מלכותי.
בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל בעגלה
ובזמן קריב ויאמרו
אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך
לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה
ברכו
לעילה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה
תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעולמה ויאמרו אמן. ברכו את אדוני המבורך ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני מלך עולם מצורו ובורא חושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל.
You may be seated. We continue in Hebrew or the English, middle of page 100.
אין כרך אדוני בעולם הזה, ואין זולתך מלכנו לחיי עולם הבא, אפס ביתך גוננו למות המשיח, ואין דומה לך מושיענו לתחיית המתים. אל אדון על כל המעשים, ברוך ומבורך בפי כל נשמה, גודלו וטובו מלא עולם, דעת ותבונה סובבים אותו. המתגאה על חיות הקודש, שנדר בכבוד, על המרכבה זכות ומישור, לפני חיסור, חסד ורחמים לפני כבודו, טובים מאורות. ברא אלוהינו יצרם בדעת, בבינה ובשכל, כוח וגבורה נתן בהם. להיות מושלים בקרב תבל, מלאים זיו ומפיקים נוגה, נאה זיוון בכל העולם, שמחים בצאתם וששים בבואם, עושים בהם הרצון קונם, פאר וכבוד נותנים לשמו, צהלה ורינה לזכר מלכותו, קרא לשמש ויזרח אור, ראה והתקין צורת הלבנה, שבח נותנים לו כל צבא מהרום, תפארת וגדולה, שרפים ואופנים וחיות הקודש. page 109, ליל אשר שבת מכל המעשים. תתברך משה נשום מעשה דרך ועל מורש עשית פרוך הסלע, תתברך צורנו מלכנו גלון בורא קדושי. להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח בשפה ברורה בנימה קדושה, כולם כאחדונים אומרים ביראה, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוא כל הארץ, כבודו בפנים בחיות הקודש, ברעש גדול מתנסים לעומת צרפים לעומתם, משבחים ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו, לאל ברוך נעמו תיתנו. אור חדש על ציון תאי ונזכה כולנו מרעל אורו, ברוך אתה אדוני יוצר המאורות, ורבבתנו אדוני אלוהינו. והאר עינינו בתורתך ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך. Good morning everyone. I would like to tell you we are here in Old Westbury and we have to make celebration for Chloe. So let's clapping together and singing together. This is what we are. והאר עינינו בתורתך דבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה וליראה את שמך, שלא נבוש לעולם ועד, לא נבוש לעולם ועד, כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא בטחנו, נגילה ונשמחה, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. Good job, Chloe.
We have the Shema coming up in a moment, so everyone get ready.
להודות לך בשמך, ברוך אתה אדוני הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Close our eyes.
1, 2, 3.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod, Malchuto Leolam Va'ed, Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha, Bechol levavcha, Uvechol nafshecha, Uvechol meyodecha, Ve'hayu hadvarim ha'ele, Asher Anohi metzevaha hayom alevaveha, Veshinantam levaneha, V'debarta bam, V'shivteha beveteha, Uvlefteha baderech, Uvshokveha, Uvkumeha, Ukshartam leot, al yadeha, Ve'hayu letotafot, Beineineha, Uchtavtam, Amezuzot beiteha, Uvishareha.
We
וים
continue,
שמות תשמעו מצוותיו שלכם, צווה אתכם היום לאהבה את אדוני לכם עובדו בכל לבבכם ובכל נפשכם.
we continue in the Hebrew or the English till the top of page 113.
למען ירבו ימיכם מביניכם על אדמה שנשבע אדוני לאבותיכם, לתת להם כי מהשמיים על הארץ. ויאמר אדוני אל משה לאמור דבר בני ישראל ואמרת להם עשו להם ציצית. על כנפי בגדיהם את דורותם ונתנו על ציצית. הכנפת תהיל תכלת והיה לכם מציצית. וראיתם אותו וזכרתם את כל מצוות אדוני ועשיתם אותם ולא תטורו אחריכם אשר אתם זונים אחריהם למען תזכרו. ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי והייתם קדושים לכם, אני אדוני לכם אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים להיות לכם לאלוהים, אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. ויציב ונכון וקם וישר ונאמן. לדור ודור קום שמה קם חיסון נכון מלכותו באמונתו לעד קיימת ודבריו חיים וכהימים. פודנו מצילנו מעולם שמך, אין אלוהים זולתך, עזרת אבותינו אתה ומעולם. תהילות לעילנו ברוך ומבורך, משה ובני ישראל לכנו שירה, בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם, מי כמוך באלים, מי כמוך נדר בקודש, נורא תהילות. שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, לשמך שפת הים, יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו,
אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, עובדך ונומך, יהודה וישראל. גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We rise, page 115b, as we begin the service known as the Amidah. It means standing in Hebrew. This is the standing portion of the service, hence we're all standing. We're looking straight ahead at the Aron Kodesh, the Holy Ark, but more importantly, eastward towards Jerusalem, as we always direct our hearts and minds. Page 115b.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק ואלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גוי לבני בניהם למען שמו באהבה, מלך חוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור עולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים, מחיה, סומך ורופא, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, לשני עפר מחמוך, ומדומה לך, מלך ממית ומחיה, ומצמיח ישועה, ונאמן אתה להחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מחיה המתים. נקדש את שמך בעולם כדי שמקדישים אותו משמם ברום, ככתוב על יד נביאך, וקרא זה אל זה ואמר, קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוא כל הארץ כבודו. אז בקורש גדול, אדיר וחזק משמיעים קול, מתנסים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם ברוך יאמרו, ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו. ממקומך מכנו תופיע ותמלוך עלינו, כי מחכים אנחנו לך. מתי תמלוך בציון, בקרוב בקרוב בימינו, בקרוב בימינו לעולם ועד תשכון. תתגדל ותתקדש בתוך ירושלים עירך לדור ודור ולנצח נצחים ועינינו תראנה ועינינו תראנה מלכותך כדבר האמור בשירי עוזך על דוד משיח צדקך ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהיך ציון לדור ודור הללויה לדור ודור לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ולנצח נצחים ולנצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושבחך אלוהינו מפינו לא ימוש לעולם ועד כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה כי אל מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש.
We continue down silently in the Hebrew or the English through page 120. If you're still davening the Amidah, please don't interrupt. We continue with Kaddish Shalem, page 138. Just an explanation. Every time we come to a Kaddish, whether the Chatzi Kaddish, the short Kaddish, or the Kaddish Shalem, it's the full Kaddish, which always follows on Amidah. The mourner's Kaddish, it marks a transition. It means we're transitioning from one portion of the service into the next. So we just finished the Shacharit, or the morning service. We're about to transition now into the Torah service, when we take out the Ark, and we open the Ark, and we take out the Torahs, and we read from them, a very important part of the service, and something that I think typifies the Bat Mitzvah experience. So page 138, Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמר הבא ועל מה דברה קרותיהם נחותי בחייכון ובכל מחיידך ובית ישראל בעגלה וזמן קריב ואמרו אמן יהי שמי
רבה מבורך לעולם לא מיומיה יתברך
יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר בתרומה ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי דקודשה
בריהו
לעילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעלמה ואמרו
אמן
יתקבץ לו טון ובו טון דכל ישראל קדם עוון וישמע ואמרו יש לומר רבה מן שמה וחיים אלה בכל ישראל ואמרו
עושה שלום ברומן הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ואמרו V'imru Amen. Yaseh Shalom, hey, Yaseh Shalom, hey, Shalom Aleinu ve'al Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, hey, Yaseh Shalom, hey, Shalom Aleinu ve'al Yisrael.
V'imru Amen.
And page 139, Seder Kriyat HaTorah, the service are opening up the ark and taking out and subsequently reading from the Torah scroll.
אין כמוך באלוהים אדוני ואין כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל עולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור. אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. אהבה רחמים, היטיבה ברצונך את ציון. תבנה חומות ירושלים, תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי בך לבד בטחנו, מלך רם ונישא אדון עולמים. ויהי בנשוא אהרון ויאמר משה, קומה אדוני ויפוצו, וינוסו משנאיך לפניך, כי מציון אדוני מירושלים, ברוך שנתן תורה, ברוך שנתן תורה לעמו ישראל.
And we continue with what's an Aramaic passage from the Zohar, the middle of page 139, until the sixth line from the top of page 140.
קדישה, קדישה יקירה, נאמר תושבחן, בהנרחת, בהנרחת, ולשמי קדישה, קדישה יקירה, נאמר תושבחן, יהבה קודמה, ותפתח ליבי באורייתא, ותשלים משאלין דליבי, בליבו בכל מוח ישראל, לטבול חיים ולשלם. Amen.
The Torah scroll that we read for the Shabbat, it's rolled to Bereshit. It's taken from the ark, and it's to be passed from generation to generation, as we say in Hebrew, l'dor v'dor, from the grandparents to the parents to the sibling, Jacob, her brother, and then Chloe himself.
Come with me. Everyone, please align, facing to the congregation. Chloe, come here. So I'm going to be doing myself. If you feel uncomfortable, let me know. Immediately, I'm going to be take the tour of it. And we go to the stairs. Step slowly, slowly. Okay? 1, 2, 3.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael. Okay, Echad. Wait. Go.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shema.
Echad Eloheinu Torana. Adonenu. Facing to the ark, and we bow. Adonai Hagedula, Hagedula, Atiferet.
Jacob, walk alongside.
Hello. אדוני אלוהינו, והשתחוו להר קודשו, כי קדוש אדוני אלוהינו. תורה, תורה, תורתו. היי, תורה, תורה, תורתו. קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב,
מורשה קהילת יעקב, תורת ציווה לנו משה, מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, מורשה קהילת יעקב, תורת ציווה לנו משה. You may be seated. So, as I mentioned, this is a special Shabbat. It's the first Shabbat following the fall, the festivals. It's also Chloe Gross's bat mitzvah, but it's also when we've begun the Torah anew. We're back to the very beginning. We're back to the basics. The Torah reading can be found in your red Eitz Chaim Chumashim. So for the next little while, we're not going to be using your Sidurim or your prayer books. We're going to be using the Chumashim. So we begin on page 30. Page 30, chapter 5 of the book of Bereshit, or Genesis, as it's known in Hebrew. This is the scene where we read about the generations of Adam, or Adam, the very first man, who, according to the lineage that's listed, lived for 930 years. And of course, as you'll see, he wasn't even the oldest man in the Bible. You have Methuselah, or Methuselah, who lived for 969 years. We don't know how they recorded time, of course. In biblical time, it may have been a different designation for years. It certainly seems, of course, we would know impossible, modern science notwithstanding, to live that long. But it's the last third of the Torah reading, and of course it ends with chaos. Adam and Eve had already been expelled from the garden at this point. Cain killed his brother Abel, and now the generations of man or humanity are starting to break down, and angels are coming from the heavens, and they're cohabitating with the women, and there seems to be a lot of lawlessness and chaos, and God is so angry at the end of this parsha, at the end of this portion, that he's going to decide to destroy the earth, because he's disappointed with his creations, with his experiment. There's only one man who's found solace in his eyes, and that is Noah, or Noach in Hebrew. But we're going to read more about him in next week's Parsha. This week, of course, it began with creation and chaos, voting of destruction. Again, page 30, chapter 5 in the Hebrew, or chapter 5, verse 1 in the Hebrew or the English.
אתם מדליקים אדוני אלוהיכם חיים כולכם היום. Please. Yes.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, אשר בחר בנו מן כל העמים, ונתן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. Now we take two step back, please. Thank you. אמן. בספר תולדות אדם ביום ברא אלוהים, אדם בדמות אלוהים, עשה אותו זכר ונקבה בראם, ויברך אותם ויקרא את שמם אדם, ביום היבראם, ויחי אדם 300 שנה, ויוולד בדמותו כצלמו, ויקרא את שמו שת, ויהיו ימי אדם אחרי הולידו את שת 800 שנה, ויולד בנים ובנות, ויהיו כל ימי אדם אשר חי 900 שנה ו30 שנה וימות.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Okay. Take your corner if you tell it.
The Torah continues, page 31, chapter 6 is the top of the page in the Hebrew and the English. It mentions Seth. This was the child, the son born to Adam and Eve after Cain had murdered Abel.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
אמן. ויחי אישת 5 שנים ו100 שנה, ויולד את אנוש. ויחי שת אחרי הולידו את אנוש 7 שנים ו800 שנה, ויולד בנים ובנות, ויהיו כל ימי שת 12 שנה ו900 שנה וימות.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Thank you so much. Mazel tov. Good job. Thanks.
The Torah continues, page 31, verse 9. This mentions Enosh, or Enos is how we would say it in English. It means actually mortal or human, and this is Seth's son. An interesting fact, the second chimp that was sent into space by the NASA, the U.S. space program, his name was Enosh.
You ready? Okay, take your corner of your talit, this one. Touch and kiss here. Touch and kiss. Good job. And now the first line, please. Hebrew, English, Spanish, whatever. Baruch Adonai Amvorach Leolam Vaed.
Baruch Adonai Amvorach Leolam Vaed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. ויחי אנוש 90 שנה ויולד את כנען. ויחי אנוש אחרי הולידו את כנען 15 שנה ו800 שנה, ויולד בנים ובנות, ויהיו כל ימי אנוש 5 שנים ו900 שנה וימות.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Thank you very much. Mazel tov. Kintotan. Nice to see you. Jordan, you announced the page? Coming up, please. Give it to him your Hebrew name. Malka. Say the blessing, you have it here, first line. Baruch.
Baruch et Adonai Hamarach.
Baruch Adonai Borach Leolam Vaed. Baruch Adonai.
Baruch Adonai Hamarach Le'olam Va'ed.
Good. Baruch. Continue.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
אמן. ויחי כנען 70 שנה ויורד את מהללאל. ויחי כנען אחר הולידו את מהללאל 40 שנה ו800 שנה וילד בנים ובנות. ויהיו כל ימי כנען 10 שנים ו900 שנה וימות. ברוך אתה.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. Mazel tov. You can go down here, right here.
The Torah reading continues with the fifth Aliyah, chapter 31, verse 5, verse 21 in the Hebrew or the English. This about Chanuk, who actually lived a far shorter life than everyone else, only 365 years, and then he was taken by God, and says he walked with God. The assumption, of course, is that he was taken early, he died early, but he's the only person in the Torah specifically where it's mentioned, Hitalech Be'elokim, that he was walked with God. So maybe that perhaps there's something special about him, that he was taken up to the heavens and walked side by side with God.
He did. Everything okay. Everything good.
Verse 21.
He knows the job. He can read the Torah either. Baruch.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamvarach.
Baruch Adonai Borach L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamvarach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen. ויחי מהללאל 5 שנים ו60 שנה ויולד את ירד. ויחי מהללאל אחר יולדו את ירד 30 שנה ו800 שנה ויולד בנים ובנות. ויהיו כל ימי מהללאל 95 שנה ו800 שנה וימות. ויחי ירד 260 שנה ו100 שנה ויולד את חנוך. ויחי ירד אחר יולדו את חנוך 800 שנה ויולד בנים ובנות. ויהיו כל ימי ירד 260 שנה ו900 שנה וימות. Touch and kiss the Torah again.
Baruch Atah
Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Mazel tov.
Thank you.
Announce the page. One second. You're going to be with your husband to get your own idea. You're coming here. אל תדאג משום דבר. אל תדאג. תקח את הטלית. קח את הטלית. touch and kiss here. קח את הטלית. touch, kiss. וברכו. בכבוד. זה עברית, אנגלית, ספרדית. אוקיי? בבקשה.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ותנן לנו את תורתו. ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. ויהי חנוך 65 שנה ויולד את מתושלח. ויתהלך חנוך את האלוהים אחרי יולידו את מתושלח 300 שנה. ויולד בנים ובנות. ויהיו כל ימי חנוך 65 שנה ו300 שנה. ויתהלך חנוך את האלוהים בעינינו כי לקח אותו אלוהים. ברוך.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Coming up. בבקשה.
The sixth Aliyah continues, page 32, verse 25. This mentions Methuselah, who is the grandfather of Noah, the oldest man in the Bible. He lived to 969 years.
תיקח את הטלית. ויחי למך, yes? 20.
V'kach oto Elohim.
ויחי one second. ויחי למך, please. ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בחר בנו מכל העמים ונתן לנו את תורתו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
אמן. ויחי למך 280 שנה ומעט שנה ויולד בן ויקרא את שמו נוח לאמור זה נחמנו ממעשינו מצבון ידינו מן האדמה אשר עוררה אדוני. ויחי למך אכלה הורידו את נוח 590 שנה ו500 שנה ויולד בנים ובנות ויהי כל ימי למך 77 שנה ו700 שנה וימות.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לנו תורת אמת וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו ברוך אתה אדוני נותן התורה.
Amen. You stay here one more aliyah until you finish and then you go down.
And taking the seventh Aliyah, are proud to have up Chloe's parents, the parents of our Bachor Habat Mitzvah girl, Danielle and Brian. The final Aliyah, the final official Aliyah, can be found page 33, chapter 6, verse 1. And again, this is about when we read a strange scene most people don't remember from the Bible, but chaos is starting to appear on the earth. With angels coming down, cohabitating with human women, mortal women, and there just seems to be a lot of confusion and even violence all around, lawlessness, and God regrets his decision to have created humanity in the first place.
Baruch Adonai Havarah.
Baruch Adonai Morach L'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Morach L'olam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Nice choir, but Brian, I'm not hearing you. אמן. ויהי נוח בן 500 שנה ויולד נוח את שם ואת חם ואת יפת ויהי כי החל האדם לריב על פני האדמה לרוב על פני האדמה ובנות ילדו להם ויראו בני אלוהים את בנות האדם כי טובות הנה ויקחו להם נשים מכל אשר בחרו ויאמר אדוני לא ידון רוחי באדם לעולם בשגעם הוא בשר והיו ימיו 120 שנה הנפילים היו בארץ בימים ההם וגם אחרי כן אשר יבואו בני האלוהים אל בנות האדם וילדו להם המה הגברים כאשר אשר מעולם אנשי השם. ברוך
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Natan Lanu Torat Emet V'chayei Olam Nata B'tochenu Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Please rise.
Wait. Isedit Gada, 1 second. You stay, but you can stay. Please. 1, 2, go. Eat Gadal, go.
Yikadal ve'yikadash shemei rabba.
Amen.
Be'alma divra tirute ve'amlich malhute.
V'hayechon.
Uv'yomehon uv'hayedeho beit Yisrael. בעגלה ובזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמרה במבורך לעולם ולעולמי עולמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח ויתפאר וירומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתהלל ויתהלל שמי דקודשה ברכו לאלה מן כל ברכתה ושירתה
תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירם בעולמה
ואמרו אמן.
I'm going to recite a Misha Berach, a prayer of well-being for all those in our community who are sick or ailing. If you have the name of someone, please come forward. You can whisper the name to me in the Hebrew or the English or the Yiddish or the Farsi. It doesn't matter if the person's Jewish or not, but in that way we can pray for their speedy and their hopeful recovery. Those who are joining us over Zoom, if you want to say the name aloud, when I pause in the Hebrew, please feel free. Mishaberach Abatin Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Tzar Kachal B'Leyahu Yivrech B'Yipei Kochim Pekilatenu et Moshe ben Rivka Elazar ben Rachel Gila bat Heshmat.
Carol Rosengarten.
Carol Rosengarten. Say that again? Noderev bat Monir. Bruce Jan. Oh God! Remind me after Shabbat. What's going on? Yeah. Baba June Shel Herzliya Mozinia. Oh, sorry. Hadassah bat Shalom. Hartley Spat. Ben Aharon, Eileen Spatz. Anybody else? Anybody else? וכל המגילה הקדוש הקדוש ברוך הוא מלא רחמים עליהם וחזקם ורתם משלח מרפוא שלם ונשמם רפואת הנפש ורפואת בתוך שרחי ישראל שבא מזרוק וברוק לבוא השבגלה זמן קריב ונאמר Amen. And we're going to say a special Misha Berach for the brave men and women serving on our behalf in the IDF, the Israel Defense Forces, and the armed forces of the United States of America who help protect our values, our beliefs, and our way of life.
Misha Berach. One second, before I start, please repeat after me. It's very short word. Misha Berach. Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak veYaakov Hu yevarech et chayalei tzva hagana leIsrael. One more time loud. Misha Berach Avotenu Avraham, Yitzchak veYaakov, Hu yevarech et chayalei tzva hagana leIsrael. העומדים משמר ארצנו והר אלוהינו מגרון לבנון בין בר מצרים. מניהם הגדול וברא ביבשה באוויר ובים. ייתן אדוני את בין הקמים לפניהם נגפים מפניהם. הקדוש ברוך הוא ישמור ויציל את חיילינו מכל צרה ומצוקה, מכל נגע ומחלה, וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם, ויעטרם בכתר ישועה בעטרת ניצחון, ויקוים בהם הכתוב כי אדוני אלוהיכם אוהל עמכם להושיע אתכם. Misha Berach אבותינו אברהם יצחק ויעקב, הוא יברך את חיילי צבא ההגנה לישראל, ונאמר אמן.
You may be seated.
תעמוד, 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 תעמוד הקלת הבת מצווה, אורן בן דוב ואביבה, maftir bechavod.
And for the Maftira Aliyah, the Aliyah which precedes the Haftarah, we call up the Bachora Habat Mitzvah, the Bat Mitzvah girl herself. She's going to read now from the actual Torah scroll. Chloe Gross.
Baruch
Adonai Hamorach Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamorach Le'olam Va'ed.
I don't see what you're talking
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et toratav. Baruch Atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Vayar Adonai ki rabah rad ha'adam ba'aretz ve'ho yetzer mashteva libo rak ra kol hayom vaynahem Adonai ki asa et ha'adam ba'aretz ve'et atsev elibo vayomer Adonai emhe et ha'adam asher barati me'al penei ha'adam me'adam ad bahema ad remes ve'ado pashamayim ki nichamti ki asitim ve'noach matzahen be'enei Adonai.
Good job. Say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torat emet ve'hayei olam nata betoheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
It's my pleasure at this time now to say a special Misha Berach, a prayer of well-being in the Hebrew and the English, over Chloe Gross, as she officially becomes a bat mitzvah, actually when she turns 12 in Jewish tradition, right? But she publicly, I think, becomes a bat mitzvah as we understand it in front of family and friends this morning, whether you're here physically or over Zoom. And let me say the blessing over her, although she's not done yet, believe me. No rest for the weary. Mishaverach v'tin Abraham Yitzchak v'Yakoser k'chavaleyahu v'orech et Oren bat Dov ve'Aviva shagil limitzvot v'ala likvod hamakom likvod haTorah likvod haShabbat HaKadosh Baruch mechay v'yachaya v'yichonen libad liot shlema im Adonai Eloheha lago b'torto l'lachet b'drachav l'shmor b'tzotav v'shlach bracha v'tzachal b'chol masayadeha yirtzon shkoreha l'gadla l'Torah l'chupat l'masim tovim v'tim sachan v'sechel tov b'enei Elohim v'adam v'nomar Amen. May God, who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Becca, Rachel, and Leah, bless Chloe Gross, who has been called to the Torah upon reaching the age of mitzvot with reverence for God, the Torah, and Shabbats. May the Holy One protect and sustain her, helping her to be wholehearted in her faith, to study Torah and fulfill mitzvot, and to walk in God's ways. May her parents rear her to maturity, guiding her to love of Torah, right, the Jewish learning, to the chuppah. Do you know what that is? That's the marriage canopy. But first we'll worry about your graduation from middle school and high school and college, right? And to life of good deeds. May Chloe find favor before God and the community, as she certainly has this morning, and let us all say, Amen. And please rise. We're going to lift and tie the Sefer Torah. And I'm pleased to see we have congregants coming up to do this, and I know they're good family friends. Noah and Marla Kruger.
Zvi ben Dov. Noam ben. Your father, your mother? Nathaniel v'Hadassah. Noah ben Nathaniel v'Hadassah. Marla bat Avraham. Okay. Vezot, open. Like a circle. Israel al pi Adonai, and go to sit down there. Sit down? Yes, sit down.
Gotta be down there, I can't see where I am.
There you go. Okay. Okay.
You may be seated.
You have to stay here until tomorrow.
We have now what's known as the Haftarah. It's not the Haftorah, but the Haftarah, it means finishing. It's a selection from the book of prophets. Whenever we finish the Torah reading, whether it's Shabbat or a festival day, we read a selection from the book of prophets. Of course, this Shabbat's no exception. And the reading for the prophetic reading comes from the prophet Isaiah, or Yeshayahu in Hebrew. Page 35 is the introduction. In your red Eitz Chaim Chumashim, we're on page 35. The Hebrew and English text in the following pages, it's from Isaiah chapter 42, beginning verse 5. And the Maftirah, or the person who chants the Haftarah this Shabbat morning, of course, is our Bechor HaBat Mitzvah, our Bar Mitzvah girl, Chloe Gross. So let's give her our support spiritually and physically by not talking or not being distracted by anything in front of us or to behind us or to the side of us. And let's give her our full undivided attention.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher barhar bin v'im tovim v'ratzah v'divrehem ha'ne'emarim ba'emet. Baruch atah Adonai haboher b'Torah u'Moshe avdo u'v'Yisrael amor unviei ha'emet v'tzedek. Ko amar ha'el Adonai borei hashamayim v'notehem roka ha'aretz v'etzaecha noten neshama la'am aleha veruach la'cholim ba. Ani Adonai keraticha v'tzedek v'hazek beyadecha v'tzorcha v'tenha livrit am le'or goyim livkawach anayim ivrot le'otzi mimazger asir mibet kele yosh v'hoshe. Ani Adonai hu shemi uchvodi leoher lawaten utihilati la pesilim hari shanot hineva'u v'halashot ani magid b'terem titzmachna ashmiya etchem. Shiru ladonai shir hadash tilato miksei haaretz yardei hayam umlo im veshveihem yisu midbar ve'ara hatzarim teshev kadar yaronu yishva sela merosh harim yitzvahu yisimu ladonai kavot utihilato ba'im yagidu Adonai kagibor yatzeh Kishmil hamot ya'ir kin'a yariya afyotzriya alova yitgabar eheshati me'olam aharish etabak kayolada efe esham v'shachaf yahad ahariv harim ugvaot v'ho esbam ovish v'samti necharot la'amim v'agamim ovish v'holti irim ba'derech Lo yada'u bintivot lo yada'u adechem asim mesha lifnehem le'or umekashim lemeshor ele hadvarim asitim velo azvartim nasogu ahor yav shuvoshet habotim ba'pasal hamarim lemesa atem Eloheinu haharashim shama'u v'ha'ivrim habitu lirot mi iver ki imavdi veherish ki malchi ishla mi ve'er ki malchi ve'ir ke'eved Adonai ra'ot rabot velo תשמור פקוח אזניים ושמע. אדוני הפץ לאמן, תדקו יגדיל תורה וידיר. והוא אמבזוז ושסו, הפר הבורים כולם, ובתי כולאים הבאו. האו לבז ואין מציל, משיסה ונאמר השב. מי והם יעזיז, זאת יקשיב וישמע לאוהר. מי נטל עם שיסה, יעקב וישראל לבוזים. הלו אדוני זו, התנו לו, ולא עברו בדרכה הלו, ולא שמעו בתורתו, וישפו העלה המה אפו, וזוז מלחמוות להו, מסביב ולא ידע, ותראה בו ושימה לב. ואתה כה אמר אדוני, בורא יעקב, ויוצר ישראל אל תירא, כי קלתך קראתי, ושמך לאתה. כי תרבו במים, יצאני, ובנחרות לא ישטפוה, כי תלה במרש, לא תכווה, ולכבה לא תברך. כי אני אדוני אלוהיך, קדוש ישראל מושיעך, נתתי הפרח מצרים, כוש וסבא תחתיה. מאשר יכרת וענה, נפרדת ואני אהרתיך, ותהי אדם תחתיך, ולימין תחת נפשך. אל תירא כי איתה אני, ממזרע אבי זרעך, ומערב אקבצך. אמר לצפון תני, ולתימן אל תכלאי, הביא וענה מרחוק, ובינותי מצי הארץ. כל הנקרא בשמי, ולכבודי בראתי ויצרתי, אף עשיתי. הוציא עמי עיוור ועיניים, איוב וראשים ואזניים, לאמור. כל הגויים נקבצו, יחטפו לימים, מי והם יגידו זאת, וישנות ישמינו ייתנו, עדיהם ויצדקו ישמעו, ויאמרו אמת. אתם אדם לעם אדוני, ועבדי אשר בחרתי לעמן, תדעו ותאמינו לי ותבינו, כי אני הוא לפניו נצור, וחרא לא יהיה. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל העולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן, האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך, אהור לא ישוב ריקם, כי אל מלך נאמן והמן אתה. ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הנאמן בכל דבריו. רחם על ציון, כי הבאת היינו, ולעולפת נופש תושיע במהרה וימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני, משמח ציון בבניך. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא, ובדך ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך, במהרה יבוא והגל ליבנו. על כיסו לא ישב זר, ולא ינהלו עוד ההרים את כבודו, כי בשם קדשו הנשבעת לו, שלא יכבה נרו לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן דוד. על התורה ועל העבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום השבת הזה, שנתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, לקדושה, למנוחה, לעבוד ולתפארת. על הכל, אדוני אלוהינו, אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותה, יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת.
Amen. Good job.
Thank you.
Now it's time to throw gently the candy, please.
Gently.
Yes, he did.
And please let me clapping together and singing Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, Siman Tov u'Mazel Tov, u'Mazel Tov וסימן טוב, יהיה לנו, יהיה לנו,
Yisrael.
יהיה לנו, ולכל ישראל, דוד מלך ישראל, חי וקיים.
Chloe Gross.
דוד מלך ישראל, חי וקיים. איי איי איי, סימן טוב ומזל טוב ומזל טוב, סימן טוב ומזל טוב ומזל טוב, סימן טוב ומזל טוב ומזל טוב וסימן טוב. יהיה לנו, יהיה לנו, יהיה לנו, ולכל ישראל.
Yisrael.
יהיה לנו, יהיה לנו, ולכל ישראל. דוד מלך ישראל, חי וקיים. דוד מלך ישראל, חי וקיים.
In addition to so eloquently chanting from a long haftarah and reading from the Torah scroll and leading us in portions of the service and dodging those fruit candy projectiles while keeping her poise and her beautiful smile, Chloe Gross has prepared Devar Torah, the words of Torah, about that which she and I have studied together these past few months, and she's going to deliver it for you now up here while speaking slowly and clearly, and not forgetting to enunciate each and every word. But don't be nervous. So, without any further ado, I give you our Bechorah Habat Mitzvah, our Bat Mitzvah girl, Chloe Gross.
But don't forget that on the summer, every Tuesday by 5 o'clock in Israel, I have phone call from Chloe for her camp. But I was so glad that she had this.
Shabbat Shalom. My Torah portion is called Bereshit, and it is from the book Genesis. Bereshit means beginning, and interestingly, this is the first weekly Torah portion in the annual cycle of Torah readings. This Torah portion focuses on the process by which God creates heaven, earth, and all of its inhabitants. On the first day, God created light. On the second day, sky. On the third day, God created earth and all the seas. On the fourth day, the sun, moon, and stars were created, separating day from night. On the fifth day, God created birds to fill the air and sea creatures to fill the water. On the sixth day, land animals were created. On the seventh day, God rested. This day, rest became known as Shabbat. The idea of creation and the evolution of life is represented in this Torah portion. God was very deliberate about the order in which these creations were established. God appeared from darkness and chaos to create light even before creating the sun. This is interesting because what was light like before the sun, and how could days be measured if the sun was not created until the fourth day? While these are interesting questions to consider, what's evident to me is that God's creations must have required a tremendous amount of planning and hard work. Whereas God could have created everything all at once, God took several days to establish the world, animals, and finally people. I imagine that God must have spent a lot of time planning the details for something as complex as our world. Another important idea is that God created people with the ability to make decisions for themselves. While the idea of free will allows people to make mistakes, it also allows individuals to correct their mistakes, learn from them, and grow as a person. Finally, God's creations led to the rest day of Shabbat, which is still observed today. Shabbat provides an opportunity to slow down, reflect on the past, and think about how one could be a better person in the future. Although sometimes challenging, I strive to relate the concepts of hard work and self-reflection taken from the parasha of Bereshit to my everyday life. For example, over time, I have become more sensitive to other people's feelings. As a young child, I was less aware of the impact of someone being excluded from a group activity. While I've always tried to be inclusive, I did not necessarily consider how someone might feel if they had been excluded. There have been times when I have felt excluded, and however difficult, those instances have allowed me to reflect and understand how others might feel in the same situation. Over time, I've become more aware and sensitive to other people's feelings, and I try to put an extra effort to make others feel included and welcome. God was very logical and patient during the process of creation. Rabbi Stenger shared with me the concept of God's creations may have separated by time, and it could have taken thousands of years to complete God's creations. This tells me that it's important to not act on impulse and instead try to be thoughtful about how you approach relationships and how you conduct yourself. This reminds me of the phrase, think before you speak, which is easier said than done, but has always resonated with me. It's not important to be the first one to speak in a class, to answer a question, or the first one to give an opinion among friends just for the sake of speaking right away. It's far better to think about all the information and speak once you had a chance to consider the facts. It's also important not to jump to conclusions and to consider the potential impact of one statement on those around you. Given the popularity of social media, it's important to be inclusive and consider the feelings of others. While posting social media videos with friends can be fun, it's very easy to post a video that can make someone feel excluded. While there is a level of pressure to post fun and interesting videos, posting isn't always the right thing to do. It's important to think about how your post or action might make someone else feel. Could my post make someone feel excluded? Could my post hurt someone's feelings? All too often, people don't ask themselves these questions. I have learned that sometimes it's simply better to not post anything at all. My parents have always instilled in me the importance of putting yourself in other people's shoes, and I try to consider this advice in my everyday life. While posting may be the popular thing to do, I feel that it's more important to put other people's feelings ahead of popularity. As with God and His creations, the idea of not giving in to temptation is also very important. For example, Adam and Eve were told not to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. However, they were tempted by a serpent and went against better judgment to eat the fruit despite God's warnings. As a result, both Adam and Eve were expelled from the Garden of Eden. While it can be tempted to try things that are off limits, there are often good reasons to not do so. In skiing, there are good reasons to avoid a closed ski trail. You could get hurt and potentially lose your lift ticket for doing so. It takes self-control and willpower to not give in to temptation. Through the story of Adam and Eve, it's clear that nobody is perfect, so if you do give in to temptation, it's best to take responsibility and own up to your actions. When God asked Adam and Eve what they had done, Adam blamed Eve, and then Eve blamed the serpent. Rather than blaming someone else, both should have taken responsibility for what they had done wrong. Not only was God angry that they disobeyed God and took the fruit, but God was also angry about not accepting responsibility. There are countless lessons to be taken from Bereshit, including the concepts of hard work and self-reflection that are relatable to my everyday life. While the stories within Bereshit are relatively simple to understand, I know that it takes hard work to put these lessons into action day to day. With the support of my family and friends, I strive to learn from my mistakes and reflect on how I can be a better person. I'd like to thank a lot of people right now. First, I'd like to thank my parents for making this day come true, motivating me and always being there to support me. I'd like to thank my brother for always being there whenever I need help, especially on any school subjects. I'd like to thank my grandparents, aunts, uncles, and cousins for coming to support me. I'd also like to thank Cantor Caravani and Rabbi Stenger for helping me prepare for this day. Lastly, I would like to thank all my friends for always putting a smile on my face. Shabbat Shalom.
Take a breath. Okay. That was wonderful. That was fantastic. Now, Sandra Weingarten, who's no stranger to your family and to this congregation, she is our president. She's going to come up in a moment and present you with some gifts. But I want to give you two things that aren't in the gift bag. All right, you recognize these, right? So take these home with you, put them in your freezer, and you're going to find someone special one day. And knowing you, it shouldn't be too hard. But a week before your wedding, let them thaw out, and then on your wedding night, each one of you consume one. The idea being you're going from one simcha to another. God willing, you'll have lots of occasions for celebration, but the next major Jewish milestone in your life will probably be your wedding day. So think about that. So I'm going to put these here. And I also just want to say a little anecdote, because I've loved having your family in this congregation. I've loved getting to know you. I remember your brother Jacob's bar mitzvah. It was like March of 2019. And my daughter Ariel was still home then. She was going to be going off to college in another year. And anyone who has teenagers knows, even if they're rabbi's kids, sometimes it's hard to motivate them to get them to come to synagogue. And I really wanted her to come to synagogue. So I'm leaving for shul in the morning, and I said, you got to come to shul, you got to come to shul. So I said, there's this great kid, Jacob Gross. He's from a great family. He's going to do an amazing job on the bar mitzvah. Please come. You got to see him. She's like, I'll try. So I said, they're doing an amazing kiddush. It's Ram. It's in the ballroom, you know. One eye open. Like, all right, I'll try. And I said, oh, and he's got this younger sister. Her name is Chloe. She is adorable. You have to see this kid. Plus, by the way, they're like us. They're a cat family. She opened up both eyes. She's like, all right, I'll come. So she made it to services, and I remember, in the ballroom, I said, oh, by the way, that's his younger sister, that's Chloe, and he saw us, and you came right over. You made a beeline, and you introduced yourself to my daughter, and she said afterwards, oh my God, how old is she? She's got such poise and such a presence. And that's been you. Like I said, I know Sandra knows your family very well, and she's going to, share some personal anecdotes and so forth. She'll probably say something similar about how much you've grown, but you really are a beautiful young lady, and not to mix metaphors, because we talk about, the fruit of the tree of life and the tree of knowledge, but, and it wasn't an apple, by the way. They think it was probably a fig, because you're talking about the Middle East. But in your case, we know that a good apple doesn't fall far from the tree. We could definitely see that with your parents. And it just also, I want to say, it was a pleasure to have worked with you these past several months. And Kent Caravani shared with us about how you zoomed in from your camp, and he was from Israel. I remember one particular, meeting where, Ram had set up, speaking about them, some trays outside, and they had warm chocolate chip cookies that they were heating up. And, I grabbed one for me and one for you. You're like, oh, my mom can't find out. Oh, and I just said that on Shabbat. But it really was. It was just a pleasure to work with you. And I hope we have the opportunity to continue to work together in the future, because it really is, and I say this honestly, on Shabbat in front of the Bima, with the Torah, with the Ark open, it is a sheer pleasure and an inspiration to work with you. And now I'd like to ask you to bow your head as the Cantor Caravani and pronounce upon you the Birkat Kohanim, the priestly benedictions in the Hebrew and the English.
יברכך אדוני וישמרך.
May the Lord bless you and keep you.
יאר אדוני פניו אליך ויחונך.
May the Lord God shine his countenance upon you and be gracious to you.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך Shalom.
May the Lord God gaze upon you and extend to you and your family a lifetime of health, happiness, and most of all, what we need in this world today, peace. So I'm going to put these in here, and we'll put your sermon in here, because I know you're going to become famous one day, and we can say this is the first public speech you ever gave. And now I'd like to call up, and again, she's no stranger to our community, Sandra Weingarten.
Good morning, everybody, and Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Stanger stole a lot of my thunder, but I think it bears repeating. Chloe, you are the last child in our Hebrew school carpool to become a bat mitzvah. So it's a very special day for me and Danielle. That's my small part in all of the beauty that went on here this morning. You delivered your Haftorah so beautifully, your Devar Torah. You have grown like 6 feet over the summer. Your family is very dear to me and to my family, as are you and your brother. You are lovely and sweet and poised and kind. You have so many friends who are twins, which I'm sure is a huge challenge. So that's more praise to you and how you conduct yourself, both as a bat mitzvah girl here in our sanctuary and also with all of your friends and your family. Your parents are wonderful, beautiful people, as are you and your brother, so I am looking forward to all of the wonderful things that are coming ahead in your life. Mazel tov, Shabbat shalom. We have a few gifts from our congregation, a bat mitzvah certificate, which is proof that this happened here today, a Kiddush cup and a Tanakh to keep by your bedside to continue your Jewish learning. So mazel tov to you, mazel tov to you, to your grandparents, your aunts, uncles, and cousins. Shabbat shalom. This.
Thank you so much.
Give that to Mom.
And I'm going to ask you to walk over to your parents. And by the way, the bag itself is a gift too. It was designed by Sandra Weingarten. And I'm going to ask your mom and dad and your brother to rise in their seats as we're going to say a special bracha. If it sounds familiar because we recite it on all the chagim, it's the Shehechayanu. So if you could repeat after me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Shehechayanu, v'kiyamanu, v'higiyanu, lazman hazeh. Amen. May, praised are you, Lord our God, sovereign of the universe, who has kept us and sustained us and caused us to arrive at this most auspicious occasion to many more Shehechayanu moments together in the future. And with Jacob and Chloe, I have no doubt there will be more Shehechayanu moments ahead. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise now as we're led in a prayer for our country in the English, bottom of page 148.
Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah, that they may administer all affairs of state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst.
Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds forge a common bond in true harmony, to banish hatred and bigotry, and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country.
May this land, under your providence, be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them to fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen.
And a prayer for the modern state of Israel in the English, top of 149.
Avinu Sheba Shamayim, Rock and Redeemer of the people Israel. Bless the state of Israel with its promise of redemption. Shield it with your love. Spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say, Amen.
Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael veGoalo. Avinu, Avinu, Sheba Shamayim, Tzur Yisrael veGoalo. Barech, barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit tzmichat geulatenu. הגן עליה בעברת חסדך, ופרוס עליה סוכת שלומך. אבינו צור ישראל וגואלו. אבינו, אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תיעטרם, ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר Amen.
We remain standing, page 150. We have Birkat HaChodesh. This is the prayer for the new month of Cheshvan, or Mar Cheshvan, as it's known, Bitter Cheshvan, which falls this week on Wednesday and Thursday.
יהי רצון מלפניך, אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו, שתחדש עלינו את החודש הזה לטובה ולברכה, שתחדש עלינו את החודש הזה לטובה ולברכה, ותיתן לנו חיים ארוכים, חיים של שלום, חיים של טובה, חיים של ברכה, חיים של פרנסה טובה, חיים של חילוץ עצמות, חיים שיש בהם יראת שמיים ויראת חטא, חיים שאין בהם בושה וכלימה, חיים של עושר וכבוד, חיים שתהיה בנו אהבת תורה ויראת שמיים, חיים שימלאו משאלות ליבנו לטובה, אמן סלע. מי שעשה ניסים לאבותינו, מי שעשה ניסים לאבותינו, וגאל אותם מעבדות לחירות, הוא יגאל אותנו בקרוב, ויקבץ נידחינו מארבע כנפות הארץ, חבר עם כל ישראל.
Amen.
חבר עם כל ישראל.
Amen.
חבר עם כל ישראל, ונאמר אמן. ראש חודש מר חשוון יהיה ביום רביעי, ולמחרתו ביום חמישי, הבא עלינו ועל כל ישראל לטובה. חדשהו הקדוש ברוך הוא עלינו ועל כל עמו בית ישראל, על כל עמו בית ישראל, לחיים ולשלום,
Amen.
לששון ולשמחה,
Amen.
לישועה ונחמה, ונאמר אמן.
We put down the Sefer Torah for now. It stood as a witness as we announced the upcoming new month, which is the new moon, not the full moon, but of course the appearance of the new moon. You'll be able to see it slightly Tuesday night if you're in a place where there's not a lot of lights to obscure it. And you could be seated. We continue in the middle of page 151 with Ashrei, and this is going to be led for us by our Bat Mitzvah girl, Chloe Gross. Respond, so please join in.
Ashrei Yoshvei Beteha, Od Yehaluleha, Selah.
Ashrei Ha'am Shekacha Lo, Ashrei Ha'am Shadonai Eloha.
Tehillah LeDavid, Aromim HaElohai HaMelech, Vavar Hashim HaLeolam Va'ed.
Bechol Yom Avarchaka, V'Lo Shimcha Le'Olam Va'ed.
גדול עמלאו מאוד ולגדולתו אין הכר.
דור לדור ישבח מעשיך, גבורותיך יגידו.
הדר כבוד הודיך ודברי נפלאותיך עשיך.
ועזוז נרתך יאמרו, גדולתך ספרנה.
זהר רב טובך יביעו וצדיקתך ירננו.
חנו ורחום אדוני, ערך אפיים וגדול חסד.
טוב אדוני לכל ורחמן על כל מעשיו.
יודיעך עיני כל מעשיך וחסידיך יברכוך.
כבוד מלכותו יאמרו וגבורתך ידברו.
להודיע לבני אדם גבורותיו וכבוד אדם מלכותו.
מלכותה מלכות כל העמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור.
שמח אדוני לכל הנופלים, זוקף לכל הכפופים.
עיניך אליך יסברו ואתה נוטה להם את הלחם בעיתו.
פותח את ידיך ומצביע לכל הרצון.
צדיק אדוני בכל דרך והחסיד בכל מעשיו.
קרוב אדוני לכל קרב, לכל שקר ובאמת.
רצון יריה יעשה ואת שיבתם ישמע ויושיעם.
שומר אדוני כל אבל ורשעים ישמיד.
תהילה אדוני ידבר פי ודברי כל שורשים קדשו לעולם ועד.
ואנחנו נברך ימי תמי עד עולם. Hallelujah. We rise as the Sefer Torah is returned to the Ark, page 153.
Okay, follow me, please. Follow me. אדוני למבול ישב וישב אדוני מלך לעולם אדוני עוז לעמו ייתן אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. Who is open the ark please? Open the ark. Who is open? Miller? Miller's, okay. And then Marla Kruger, you're gonna be coming up. Come here.
Don't drop it, whatever you do.
את חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם לכל נתיבותיה שלום השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם.
Shabbat Shalom. I think one of the things, you can maybe seated. I'm about to speak. I wouldn't want to make anyone standing over the next 55 minutes. That would just be cruel and unusual punishment. I think one of the things that led me or inspired me to want to be a rabbi, believe it or not, was my very first day of college. We were all required at that time to take a course known as University Humanities, and the students, the undergraduate, dubbed it UHOM. And it was a survey of Western literature and early civilization. And my professor was a man named Mark Brettler. He was an Orthodox Jew, and he introduced himself on the first day of class. He wore kippah. He was from Brooklyn. And we were actually talking about the very first chapter of Genesis and the creation story. And he put it up, and these were the days pre, whiteboards and pre, any sort of laser presentation, so old school blackboard. And he wrote down the first 3 days of creation, 1, 2, 3, right? Light, water, earth. And then he wrote down, corresponding to it, the next 3 days of creation, days 4, 5, and 6, which were the sun and the moon and the stars, fish and fowl, and then animals, humanity. And he asked if there was any kind of correlation or correspondence between those first 3 days of creation and then the next 3 days of creation. And I was dumbfounded, but a few hands shot up, and one of them, it must have been a student who either went to a Catholic school or yeshiva, said, well, the last 3 days of creation, 4, 5, and 6, are completely interdependent on the first 3 days of creation. In other words, if the first day of creation you had light from darkness, and then day 4 you had the sun and the moon and the stars, that's refining the whole concept of darkness and light. And day 2, if you had sort of a separation of waters below and waters above, in the sky, that's day 5, when you had the seas and the lakes filled with fishes and fowl, all the birds that filled the air. And then day 3, when you created land and you created the valleys and the hills, the mountains and the shrubbery and the jungles and forests, that corresponds, of course, to day 6, when you had all the animal species that filled them, including humanity. And I was just like, wow. And the professor said, absolutely right. That's exactly correct, right? The first 3 days of creation and the next 3 days of creation are interlocked or interdependent. And it could be a literary setup, or it could be that was God's plan, or it could be that as God was creating, he was refining his creation and filling his creations with different things, or different things to make them complete. And I was just amazed. And of course, one thing that was pointed out by Chloe Gross and also Clarence Darrow when he argued the Scopes monkey trial back in 1926, you can say if the sun and the moon and the stars weren't created until day 4, well then how did you measure darkness and light? How did you measure day and night? Ergo, those first 3 days of creation when the earth was still being refined, one day could have been hundreds or thousands or possibly millions of years. And I remember sitting there thinking, wow, the Bible, the Torah speaks to us today. It has real resonance. It's not something you should just be studying in Hebrew school and then forgetting about. There's literary subtext there, there's history there, sociology, anthropology, philosophy, and I was completely hooked. Now, I want to talk this morning about the whole idea about going from creation, because at the outset there's chaos, right? There's darkness. The assumption is God's just kind of bumping around in the dark. We know there's water because there's going to be a separation of water, almost like the womb, something kind of slushing around inside. And it starts out in chaos or disorder, and then it's refined, right? There's life. There's lower life. There's higher life, there's species and subspecies, and of course there's humanity as we know it. And then at the end of this first parsha, first portion of the Torah, there's of course chaos, and God is upset. Man has already deceived God, transgressed, done something he's not supposed to do. The first murder takes place when Cain slays his brother Abel. And then by the end of the Parsha, humanity is running amok and doing things they're not supposed to be doing, intermingling with divine species, and there are warriors on the earth. And God so regrets his creation that he decides he's going to start over and wipe the slate clean. Like you might cover a blackboard with water and then let it dry out and then erase everything. And I want to talk about that because we are all interdependent. Everything we do has a cosmic as well as a physical imprint and a footprint. It's all interrelated and interlocked, right? When God created humanity, he specifically said, I want you to master the earth, but I want you to guard it. I want you to be responsible for it. I want you to till and work the soil. Man has responsibility to the animal kingdom. God says, I want you to name all the species, right? There's an interdependence there. There's a responsibility that we have. And then what happens? We're told not to eat from the forbidden fruit, the tree of knowledge of good and bad, and of course, ergo as well, the tree of life. And first, female species transgresses this, and then the male as well, and we're expelled from that garden. And there's a historical downfall as well as more bad things start to happen, and humanity continues to disappoint. What's interesting is that when the snake first tempts Eve and says, why don't you eat of this fruit? Her response is, no. God told us specifically we're not to eat of the fruit of the tree of knowledge in the midst of the garden. We're not even to touch it. Now here's the interesting thing. The Torah never wastes words. I'm a rabbi, so trust me when I say that. It never wastes words. Everything is important. Everything has some meaning. If you actually look at the original commandment that God gives them, the prohibition, he never says anything about not touching the fruit. He says don't eat it, but he doesn't say don't touch it. For some reason, Eve added that prohibition. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe her husband, Adam, told her that. But of course, the snake convinces her, no. God knows that the moment you eat of this fruit, your eyes will be open and you'll be like a heavenly species. You'll be one of those divine beings. That's why he doesn't want you to do it. That's why he guards it so jealously. So what happens, of course, the interpretation is she touches the fruit. She sees nothing happens. She doesn't die, as they were originally warned. Ergo, if she could touch the fruit, maybe she could eat it as well. And her eyes are opened. And so are Adam's. And they don't die, at least not right away. Eventually they will, because they're expelled from the garden, they're expelled from paradise, and now they're mortals. They're not going to live forever, even if supposedly they live hundreds of years. But the idea being that sometimes putting an extra stringency on something can be confusing. It leads to misinterpretation. It leads to miscommunication. And it leads to mistaken assumptions. And we know that all too well in what's going on today in our own society. I know it's a scary time and it's a confusing time. At the beginning, when COVID first hit, we were having all these rules and warnings. And we didn't know what could we do, what couldn't we do. Masks wouldn't help, but then maybe masks would help, right? We shouldn't touch things. We had to be gloved every time. We had to make sure we had all this Purell. Then there was the whole concept of course, the importance of the vaccine, and then certain people refusing to have the vaccine. And then by late summer, you're hearing about this Delta variant that's affecting people. Even those who are vaccinated can still become contaminated and susceptible to it. Ergo, it's more fodder for the anti-vaxxers because they can say, well, if you could still get sick after being vaccinated, then what's the point? Why do we even need it? And one misconception sometimes fuels another, and things can get out of hand. It becomes a vicious cycle. More and more people are afraid, or they're refusing, or they take a political stand, and then you don't reach that critical mass that you need to. And another variant can spread, who knows? So how do you work against this? Better yet, if we're interdependent on one another, how can we all work together to make sure things like this don't happen, that we're all on the same page, that we're looking out for one another in the right way? Our responsibility to the earth, our responsibility to the environment, to the planet. Some people think it is real and it is factual. Some people think that nothing can be proven, it's all a big bugaboo, it's a scam, it's overrated. But of course, you have to look at the reality. Forest fires, mudslides, storms, droughts, the depletion of wildlife. What is this doing to our planet? What is it going to be doing to us? What is it going to be doing to our children and our grandchildren one day? And what will they be inheriting, or the lack of what they could potentially be inheriting if we're not responsible? Think about the first murder that takes place after man and woman have been expelled from eternal paradise. You have Cain and Abel. One of them is a tiller of the soil. He's a farmer. One of them is a shepherd. Perhaps this is also meant to be an allegory for the two different types of laborers that were often at odds and tensions with one another and not getting along. We know that Cain is jealous of Abel because Cain offered a sacrifice, Abel offered a sacrifice as well. And it seems that God took Abel's sacrifice, which was a lamb, as opposed to Cain's sacrifice, which was fruit from the soil, to be far more pleasing. In a fit of rage, Cain slays his brother, the first murder in history. Maybe he didn't know the implications. Maybe he didn't know what it meant then to take a life, that was eternal. But there's also a very strange thing that's unexplained. It says, Vayomer Cain le Hevel Achiv. Cain said to his brother Abel when they were in the field, and then the text goes blank, ... Almost like you're waiting a response on a text and then it doesn't come. And the next verse we read is that Cain murdered his brother Abel. What was said? Was there a conversation? Was it merely a pretext, a ploy to get Abel out in the field alone where Cain can set upon him? The idea being, we don't know, but there was something there, something more. And sometimes when things aren't communicated in the right way, when things are misunderstood or misinterpreted, or words aren't used in the right way, it can lead to tragedy. And finally, of course, the greatest tragedy of all is the end of this week's Parsha, when God is so disappointed in humanity and their behavior and their characteristics and their actions that he's going to destroy not just humanity, but the entire planet. He's going to flood it. A natural disaster, of course, though, it's a divine disaster coming from God himself. And it's going to affect even the animal species, save the ones that are taken on the ark. It's going to affect all the plants, the forests, the vegetation, the flora. Our actions carry tremendous weight. If we're the pinnacle of God's creation, the final thing created before the outset of Shabbat, before God rested, if we're meant to have mastery, which also means responsibility over the land, we have to act that way. We have to act with maturity. We have to act with responsibility. We have to act with care to one another, person to person, but also our very surroundings. What we do carries tremendous weight, not just for today, but for tomorrow. You can argue ever since we've been expelled from eternal paradise, from Gan Eden, we've been trying to find our way back. Will we ever? Perhaps not. If there was a Garden of Eden, where was it? Did it really exist physically, or was it just a metaphor? Has it been forever hidden from us, from God? Is it something we will find and be able to reclaim one day, but not in this world, only in the next life? We don't know. But the idea being, even though we're here now, in this world, on this planet, in this universe, with these surroundings with one another, it's not paradise. It's not perfect. It's not heaven. Things are going to happen, calamities, sickness, natural disasters. But however, that being said, we still have a responsibility, and there are things we can all do for one another and with one another to make our surroundings a little bit more contained, stable, secure, to make this planet a little bit more like paradise, a bit more of a better world, a better place for our lives and for our children and God willing, one day for our children's children, l'hador v'ador, from one generation to the next. We just have to be willing to act on it, to take the responsibility, to prove to God that we are worthy, and we are ready, and we're able. Just a thought and a wish that I wanted to leave you with on this Shabbat. Shabbat Shalom. I'd like to ask everyone to please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish, which introduces the Musaf Amidah, age 155.
Bar Mitzvah girl, please come to the bima.
Yikada ve'yikada shemei Rabba.
Amen.
Be'alma adivra kirutei ve'amlich malhutei. V'hayehon uvyomehon uvhayedehol Beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv ve'meru
Amen.
Yehi shmei Rabba mevorach. Leolam lual meomaya yitbarach ve'ishtabach ve'yipar ve'yitromam ve'yitnaseh ve'yithadar ve'yithaleh ve'yithalal shemei dekudesha brehu le'ela min kol birchata ve'shirata tushbehata v'nechamata damiran be'alma ve'meru amen.
We're putting our feet together like the angels in the heaven and looking straight ahead at the Aron, the Ark, and of course eastward towards Jerusalem, the Amidah for Musaf, again, the standing portion of the service, page 156b.
ברוך אתה, אדוני אלוהינו ולאבותינו, לאברהם וליצחק וליעקב ולשרה ולרבקה ולכם ולאליה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות, ומביא גואל לבני בניהן, מה שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר ופוקד ומושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה, אדוני, מגן אברהם ופוקד שרה, אתה גיבור עולם אדוני, מחיה מתים אתה רב להושיע, מוריד הטל, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מכלכל חיים, מחיה מתים, סומך נופלים. לישני עפר מחמוך ומי דומה לך מלך ממית ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים ברוך אתה אדוני מחיי המתים נעריצך ונקדישך כסוד שיח צרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש ככתוב על יד נביאך וקרא זה אל זה ואמר קדוש 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 כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שואלים זה לזה איה מקום כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ממקומו יפם ברחמים ואחרונם המייחדים שמו ערב ובוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים באהבה שמה אומרים שמה
ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד
שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, האדוני אחד, הוא אלוהינו, הוא אבינו, הוא מלכנו, מושיענו, והוא ישמיענו ברחמה, והוא והוא והוא.
והוא 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 והוא.
ישמיענו ברחמיו, שנית, 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 לעיני כל החי. להיות לכם לאלוהים אני, אדוני אלוהיכם, ודברי קודשך כתוב לאמור. לדור ודור, loud.
When should I do it? Will you let me know?
To go.
Ledor vador. Ledor vador. Ledor vador naki kolecha. Ledor vador.
לדור ודור,
Ledor vador.
לדור ודור,
Ledor vador
נגיד
naki kolecha. Ulenetzat netzat hi kedushateha nagdish. Kedushateha nagdish. V'shimcha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush le'olam va'ed. Lador vador, lador vador, lador vador naki kolecha. Lador vador, lador vador, lador vador naki kolecha. Ki melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh ata. Ki melech gadol, gadol v'kadosh, gadol v'kadosh ata.
Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh.
Currently in the Hebrew or the English through page 161.
What? Right now.
No, wait for me, wait.
Do I sing that?
Yes, all say shalom, okay?
You'll tell me when, right?
Yes, at the time. I'm gonna be singing.
Do I do that?
Yes, yes. Amen. Amen, 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 amen.
Will you tell me what to say? I mean,
Wait.
so you do that and then I say, oh, amen.
If you're still davening the Aliyah, please don't interrupt. We conclude page 181 with Kaddish Shalem.
יתגדל ויתקדש שם רבה.
Amen.
ועלמא דברה קהילותיהם ומחותיהם בחייכון ובכל מחייכו בית ישראל בהגרז מכרי באימרו.
Amen.
יהי
שמי רבה מבורה, לעולם לא מיומיה. יתברך.
יתברך ושתבח ויתפאר בתרומה מתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי דקודשה. לעילם כל ברכתה ושירתה תדמירם על מה באימרו.
Amen.
יתקבץ לו טון ובו דכל ישראל קדם ובון דמשמע באימרו. יש למה רבה מן שמיה וחיים אלה מהכל ישראל באימרו. Let we sing together.
עושה שלום בירומן, הוא יעשה שלום עלינו ויעקב ישראל.
Yisrael.
ואמרו,
V'imru. Amen.
יעשה שלום, היי, יעשה שלום, היי, שלום עלינו ויעקב ישראל. יעשה שלום, היי,
Shalom יעשה.
היי, שלום עלינו ויעקב ישראל.
ואמרו Amen.
You may be seated, page 182 in Carolina. We invite all of Chloe's friends
Yes, it's
and
coming.
cousins to help her up on the bima. Come on, don't be shy, guys. She asked me specifically to ask you. So long, Scott.
Charlotte. Wait, can you tell Jacob?
Where is Jacob?
He's over there.
Jacob, we need your help here. Jacob.
Jacob. so he could help us. There's 2 microphones. Jacob has to go. Until Jacob can. Hi.
A lot of fun. Let's coming up. If you know this song, join us, please.
En Kelohenu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkenu, En Kamoshienu, Mi Kelohenu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi Kemalkenu, Mi Kamoshienu, No de la Elohenu, No de la Donenu, No de la Malkenu, No de la Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shikira, Ovotinu, Lafalkeha, Ki Torah Hasaman.
And we rise for Aleinu.
What pages? Aleinu.
עלינו לשבח
לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצר בראשית, שלא עשנו קריאי הרצון, ולא שמנו כשבחות האדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו כהמונם, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא. שהוא נוטה שמיים ויוסד הארץ, ומשגרו בשמיים ממעל, ושכינתו זו בגובה מרומים. אלוהינו אין עוד, אמת מלכנו אפזו הטוב, ככתוב בתורתו, וידעת היום, והשיטות אל לבביך, כי אדוני הוא האלוהים בשמיים ממעל, ועל הארץ מתחת עיניו.
ככתוב בתורתך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד.
נאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד.
Mourner's Kaddish, page 184. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah ve'alma divrach iritei v'yamlich ma'afei v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael la mankari v'imeru. Amen. Yehi shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'me'omaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yipa'or v'yitromam v'yinaseh V'yithadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalal, shmei d'kudashah, brechu. Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imeru, amen. Yehi shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imeru, amen. Alseh shalom b'imromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'imeru, amen. You may be seated. We're going to do, in a moment, Adon Olam, but first we'll do Kiddush and Hamotzi. But just some quick announcements. First off, I want to thank the family, the Gross family, for just giving us Chloe for the morning. She did an amazing job. We're so proud of her. We knew she would, because she really has such spirit and spunk and enthusiasm. I want to welcome all your friends and family who are here from both near and far. There is a kiddush that was set up, a grab and go, right, with COVID in mind. So there are bags or like little baskets, I guess you could say, right when you leave here, sort of going out just past the fountain, if you want to grab one. And I want to thank the family for sponsoring that. I also want to thank everyone who took part in services this morning. I want to thank the cantor for leading us in Shachri, and Musaf, of course, Chloe Gross, for an amazing Torah, Haftarah, and Devar Torah. I want to thank Herzl, who was our only usher this morning, for handling things. This was the first spot mitzvah of 5782, and I think we started off with a bang. It was amazing. I want to thank our usher. I want to thank our Gabayim, Nathan Yadagari and Dr. Jordan Pritzker. Dr. Jordan Pritzker, of course, lost his mother, Lenore, and he's back from Florida and Shiva. So we want to say to you, Hamakom Yinechemcha B'toch Sha'ar V'leitzir and Yerushalayim. May God comfort you amongst all the mourners of Zion and Jerusalem. Of course, as always, we missed you when you're gone, but we do appreciate you being here, and we mourn with you in your loss. As far as further announcements, Monday evening, I think it's 7 p.m., but it's in the Shabbat announcements. There is a Zoom class co-taught by Stacy Siegel, one of our congregants, who's also the deputy mayor of East Hills, about financial planning. So please join us for that. There's no cost. You just have to go on the Zoom link. I believe it's at 7 or 7:30. Wednesday evening at 6:30, we're beginning Wednesdays with the rabbi again. It includes dinner and discussion, so we would love to have you. All teens are welcome. Whether you're OWHC or not, just let us know. We want to order, we're going to have pizza, we just want to order accordingly. Mora Mindy Kremer, of course, is here, one of Chloe's teachers over the many years. And we want to thank her for being here this morning. And Hebrew school starts on Monday. Is that correct? Our OWHC religious school starts this Monday, so we're looking forward to that as well. Look for the calendar for further announcements and the emails and so forth. I want to thank Chet for being here this morning, our custodian, who's also handled the Zoom, all those who joined us over Zoom. Services tomorrow 9:30 a.m. and 6:15, both over Zoom. Monday 8:30 a.m. and 6:15, and it'll be that way the rest of the week. Did I leave anything out, Counselor Caravani? No? Okay. All right, so we're going to do Adon Olam, page 187, and then please come forward if you're comfortable and join us for Kiddush and Amotzi. We have grape juice and wine, which tastes like grape juice.
Get ready for this music now, please.
Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Le'et Nasa V'Hetza Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Bam 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 Vehu Kipur Vehu Hakol Levado Yimloch Nora Vehu Haya Vehu Hoveh Vehu Yeh Betifara Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Bam 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 Vehu Ehad Ve'ein Sheni Laham Shilo Lehapira Beli Reshit Veli Tachlit Velo Hayon Ve'hamisa Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Bam 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 Vehu Eli Ve'hai Goali Tzorchali Ve'et Sarah Vehu Nisi Umanosli Manat Kosi Ve'yomika Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Bam 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 Ve'yado Avki Ruhi Ve'aishan Ve'ha'ira Ve'it Ruhi Ve'it Gati Adon Lahi Ve'lohira Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yetzir Nivra Bam 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 Bam
Pam, 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 para. Chloe, thank you very much. All the girls here, you are great job.
And please join us for Kiddush and Hamotzi.
Come with me now.
Specially baked and prepared chalot.
Blessing, Hamotzi. Take the binder with you, yes. Dear friend, if you feel comfortable, we have here a grape juice, we have a wine. Just come in here closer, and then you take 2 steps back, and we do המוציא.